Hello everyone. Today we're going to be going over factoring by grouping. Factoring by grouping. We're going to go through the steps and then we'll do a few examples together. So for step one, we're going to multiply the first and last numbers, so your A term and your C term. List the factors of this number. So for this one we have 2 times 5 gives us 10. And then I want you to think back to what you've learned about what the signs tell us, because if we remember what the signs tell us, then we have fewer factors that we have to write out. This sign tells us whether the signs of our factors are going to be the same or different. This sign tells us which is dominant. So if they're the same, then it tells us what they both are. If they're different, it tells us what sign the bigger number is going to be. So for this example, we have our factors of 10 are 1 and 10, and then 2 and 5. This right here, it is a minus, so that tells us that our signs are going to be different. That means one of the factors will be positive, the other will be negative. This sign tells us that the bigger number will take the negative. So for the first pair, 10 is bigger, so that means that it is negative. The 5 is bigger, that means that it is negative. Step 3, choose the pair that creates the middle term of our trinomial. The middle term, our B term, is negative 9x. So you look at your pairs of factors. Which pair is going to give you negative 9 when you combine them? 1 minus 10. That pair, that 1 minus 10, tells us how we split up our middle term. So what you're going to do is you're going to rewrite that expression, except instead of a negative 9x, we're going to split it apart and write it as plus 1x, so positive 1, and a minus 10x, that negative 10. Because 1x minus 10x is the same thing as negative 9x. We're just adjusting it to make it something that we can work with. Next, you're going to factor out the greatest common factor of the first two terms, then factor out the greatest common factor of the last two terms. When I do this, draw a line right here, and we look at the left side. What is the greatest common factor? We factor out an x because that is the GCF. On the right side, negative 5 is the greatest common factor, so we factor out negative 5. And then, if you have done it correctly, what's inside your parentheses should be the same, which means that we can pull that out as a GCF and write what remains, the x and the minus 5, in the other set of parentheses. So when we factor 2x squared minus 9x minus 5, we have two binomial factors, 2x plus 1 and x minus 5. Okay, let's practice this a couple of times. We're going to factor the trinomial 3x squared plus 11x plus 10 using factoring by grouping, so going through the steps that we just did. The first thing that we're going to do is multiply our first times our last. So 3 times 10, we're going to write that over here. That gives us 30. Then we list the factors of 30. So I found that the easiest way to do this is to go through the integers until we hit something that we've already written down. I'll show you what I mean. So our factors of 30, 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 4 is not a factor, 5 is a factor, 5 times 6, and then 6 we've already written down, so that means we would be going back up this side, so we have found all of our factors of 30. All right, now we use the signs to tell us about our factors. This tells us that the signs are the same. This plus tells us that both of them are going to be positive numbers. So everything here is positive. Now, do you remember what we do next? We look through our pairs of factors and we find the pair that has a sum of that middle term. So we're looking for 11. 5 plus 6 equals 11. Now we can start breaking apart our trinomial. We're going to rewrite the first term, 3x squared. Instead of writing plus 11x, we're going to use our two factors, and we're going to say plus 5x plus 6x. And then we're going to bring down that plus 10. So we broke apart that 11x into 5x plus 6x. Okay, so we are going to split this. We're going to look at the left side, and then we're going to look at the right side. So on the left side, we are going to find the greatest common factor of 3x squared plus 5x. Well, the greatest common factor is x, so we factor an x out of both of those terms. 3x squared divided by x is 3x. 5x divided by x is positive 5. Now we're going to do the exact same thing on the right side, so the 6x plus 10. What is the greatest common factor of 6x and 10? It's a positive 2. So we're going to factor out positive 2. 6x divided by 2 is 3x. 10 divided by 2 is positive 5. Okay, now this is where you can double check yourself. What is inside the parentheses should be exactly the same. Looks good. We have 3x plus 5 inside both of our parentheses. So we are going to take that and we're going to only write it once. 3x plus 5. And then we're going to take the other pair. We have an x plus 2, and that is what goes in our other set of parentheses. So when we factor the expression 3x squared plus 11x plus 10, we end up with two binomial factors, 3x plus 5 and x plus 2. Now, how do you check this? If you need to check your work, then you simply multiply your binomials. And remember, when you multiply your binomials, you use the acronym FOIL. Multiply the first terms, the outside terms, the inside terms, and the last terms. So real quickly, let's go ahead and check this. I'll put this in red over here. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 2, 5 times x, 5 times 2. And when we simplify that, 3x squared plus 11x plus 10. This should be the same as this, and they are. That means that you factored correctly. For this example, we have 4x squared minus x minus 3. You're going to multiply the first times the last. 4 times 3 is going to give you 12. And we will list the factors of 12. 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. 4 is already on our list, so that means that we have found all of our factors. We are going to use our signs to tell us about our factors. So this tells us, this sign, because it is negative, tells us that the factors have opposite signs. They are different. One is positive, one is negative. This minus tells us that the bigger number gets the negative. Now, since we did our factors in this nice, neat order, so 1, 2, 3, the smaller numbers are on the left, the bigger numbers are on the right, all of our bigger numbers will get a negative. So all of the numbers on the right get a negative. And since the signs are different, all of the smaller numbers are positive. Do we have a pair that creates the middle term? Do we have a pair that has a sum of -1? We do. It's right here. 3 minus 4. So this tells us how to break apart that middle term. We're going to rewrite 4x squared, and we're going to break apart that negative 1x using the factors that we found. So plus 3x minus 4x, and then bring down that minus 3. Okay, we're going to look at these two at a time. Greatest common factor of the first two. We can pull out an x. So when we factor out that x, 4x squared divided by x is just 4x. 3x divided by x is just a positive 3. GCF of the second two. As a note, anytime you have a minus right here, you're going to be factoring out a negative number. So in this one, our GCF is going to be negative 1. And when we factor out that negative 1, negative 4x divided by negative 1 is 4x. Negative 3 divided by negative 1 is positive 3. Now let's look at what's inside our parentheses. Are they exactly the same? Yes, they are. That means that we can move on with this. So we're going to go ahead and split it up. 4x plus 3 goes in our first set of parentheses, and we use our GCFs in the other set, so x minus 1. So when we factored the expression 4x squared minus x minus 3, we end up with two binomial factors, 4x plus 3 and x minus 1.